We are here for week 9 of the waiver wire. It was a crazy week scoring wise. We had some game winners. It was National Tight Ends Day, of course. They told us a million times. We had some injuries, P, and so this is going to be kind of a hectic week for a lot of teams. We have some teams that are probably floating somewhere between 3-5 and 5-3. And we got those teams that are looking for that playoff push and some others that are just trying to get in. So you're with your boy Justin Henry for Bob Farmer here. We're going to be helping you cover this week 9 waiver wire, P. It was a crazy week for injuries as well.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough seeing these top players go down with injuries. But, on the brighter note, National Tight End Day was a success. We've seen just about every top name tight end really ball out. And, the battle of the two rookie quarterbacks really showed out for a thrilling ending that I know ended some teams, handed some teams a loss at the end of the play. So really good week.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're dealing with, Stephon Diggs just announced today he has a torn ACL. Obviously, prayers up to Stephon Diggs. Was having a great season for him, top 10 receiver season in PPR leagues. He'll be out for the rest of the year. And then Christian Kirk, it was announced he will be out for the rest of the year as well. It's tough, man. We got 2 teams on bye this week, so there are a lot of names that we're not going to be able to get to today that we've already covered here on the show that I want to mention just in case you're looking for options. Cade Otton for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a strong performance and looked to be one of the main targets for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, along with Jalen McMillan, who does have some upside. Didn't have exactly the game that we were hoping for, has some upside. Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, don't forget about those guys as the Niners are going into the bye this week. Braylon Allen as well, obviously has a Thursday night matchup against the Houston Texans. Started to see a little bit more with workload. Keon Coleman has had a nice breakout here since Amari Cooper's come over. Dalton Schultz and Tyrone Tracy as well, who we saw on Monday night, have a breakout performance. But outside of those guys, we're going to go over some of the major players who are probably still available. Some of those guys are a little bit more owned than others. But let's talk about some players. And P, I want to start off with Cedric Tillman, man. Did we not talk about him this week or last week? We said, listen, if you're going to pick up somebody, pick up Cedric Tillman. He's got wide receiver 3 appeal. And we saw it. So again, my man, this is another game with Jameis now. He started. He had, he's averaged over 10 targets over the last 2 weeks, and that's with Deshaun at quarterback, DTR, with obviously Jameis now. It doesn't matter. He has stepped into a really good role. So for me, I really believe that this is a player you can trust as your wide receiver 3. You can trust as a high end type player. So I think for me, I'd be looking like I've seen the thought out there, like spend all your budget, spend everything. I don't necessarily believe in that. I think this is still a player you don't want to overspend for. We've seen it in past weeks with Juwan Jennings. We've seen it with, some of these other receivers that we've been like, hey, it's time to go all in on. And then they, it doesn't pan out. So use your fab wisely, but it's a strong spend. This isn't a player that's just a flash in the pan, P. This is a really strong player who can help out teams moving forward.
Yeah, and you could tell that, right? Because he had the game-winning touchdown, right? They trust him with that. So he's getting open deep, and he's a big part of this offense. This guy, in my opinion, is here to stay. He's, like you said, he's not just a flash in the pan. And he's actually, I think he's a better receiver to have than Jerry Jeudy, right? At least he's showing that. So deep routes, touchdowns, and that connection looks like he already has with Jameis. So, yeah, I'll take Cedric Tillman all day.
The name isn't there. The draft pedigree is slightly there. I think he's a 3rd-round pick last year. But we are seeing the usage, which is more important than anything. And I think this quarterback change has helped out a lot of players on this Browns team. But this is a guy now that is the alpha receiver on this team. This is the go-to guy. And so when you're looking for who can get the targets, who can get the red zone looks, it's like Cedric Tillman checks all these boxes. And as you can see, I mean, if it was versus Amari Cooper, you're already winning that battle. The Browns are winning that trade. Obviously, we know that's a minuscule type of move. But listen, I think it's one of those things where we can say, look, we got really good value here if you were able to get them before. Just don't treat this as like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 moving forward. Treat him as a wide receiver 3 with upside. So obviously, this is one of those things where you want to be aggressive if you have a losing record. And if you have a winning record, I'd hold on that fab a little bit more if you can. All right. But we did have some injuries. Obviously, with the Browns' performance, that was great to see. But we did have some injuries. And one of the teams, the Houston Texans, dealing with an injury. Obviously, we talked about at the top of the show, torn ACL confirmed now for Stephon Diggs. He will be missing the rest of the season. P, who's a receiver you're looking at that can help replace him?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this Texans team is reeling with injuries right now. Not just Diggs, but I mean, that's the second one that went down. Of the receivers that you can pick to replace him, I'm putting my money on John Mechie. I really do. There's Xavier Hutchinson there, but in my opinion, John Mechie, he fits that Diggs role the best out of the two that are there. Right. So he is known for his route running. And immediately after Diggs went down, he caught 2 consecutive passes on that drive. Right. So that tells me something. But going past just those 2 catches, because his stat line last week didn't look good, but going past just those 2 catches, this guy has one hell of a story. He's battled cancer, leukemia in the past. His team is really rooting for him. He was a high draft pick. They are invested in him. And, they invested a 2nd-round draft pick into him. He's an elite route runner, right? They drafted him to do that. Now he's going to actually get a chance to step in and make an actual name for himself on this team. So although I do think Tank Dell is going to be the number 1 there, the same way that Diggs had his role, John Mechie is going to fit into that role as well. So definitely love the John Mechie pick over Xavier Hutchinson. I know Tank Dell's already owned, but John Mechie is the one that you're going to want from the waiver wire.
I like John Mechie, and I liked him coming out. Obviously, the draft pedigree, as you mentioned, is already there. So in Mrs. Rookie year, this is a guy that does step into immediate opportunity, as you mentioned. And, you have Xavier Hutchinson there who has been on the field. He's been kind of middling. So this gives you another upside option who can last once Nico Collins gets back next week, once his team does start to get up to speed. And Tank Dell, obviously, you mentioned, has a pretty big ceiling here. And it's like, I think teams are going to know that. Like the Jets this Thursday are going to put coverage towards Tank Dell's way. So this gives Mechie, this gives Xavier Hutchinson, this gets, some of these other receivers, Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz, this gives additional opportunities to everybody else. So I like John Mechie. He's not somebody I would spend any fab on. I try to zero bid him, but I do think that he's, a good target to get. But we do have some breaking news, P. We do. We have some breaking news. A receiver has been traded. Deontay Johnson has been traded to the Baltimore Ravens in a game-breaking move. This is an elite move for the Baltimore Ravens, who have needed a receiver. We've seen Zay Flowers. He was a little bit banged up, but played well. We have, obviously, Rashad Bateman had taken a step up, but they get another piece on the offensive side, one of the better receivers metric-wise in the game, and Deontay Johnson, who was a little, frustrated in his role with the Carolina Panthers and this move from Bryce Young to Dalton to Bryce Young, now going to an AFC team that is a powerhouse team contending for a championship.
Dope. That's amazing.
How are you feeling about that move, man? For fantasy-wise, like this could be a pairing that we've been looking to see, right? Lamar Jackson, elite quarterback. How are you feeling if you have Deontay Johnson right now?
I'm trying to think how this fits, because it was always hard to predict who's going to be the one to be catching the rocks over there, right? You had Zay Flowers one week, and Zay Flowers was probably the more consistent one. But then they had a plethora of tight ends. You have their running backs catching. I was thinking it was a matter of time that they were going to make a trade for a wide receiver. I just thought it would be more of like a big body, go up and get it type wide receiver. So, I think it's a better move because you have Lamar versus anybody over there in Carolina. But yeah, I mean, it's a better move for his value. I'm kind of curious how it's going to fit, right? Because I think he profiles the same as Zay Flowers.
Yeah, to me, it almost like 1 week we're going to see Zay Flowers, the next week we see Deontay Johnson, and we've seen Deontay Johnson before. He's been inconsistent. I think that's the one thing that will be very prevalent here in this Ravens offense. This Ravens offense has been inconsistent all year long. They've used Lamar at times. They've used the tight ends at times. Obviously, we've seen Derrick Henry take a massive leap in this offense as the season has gone on. And then the receivers, right? We've seen Bateman have splash plays. We've seen Zay Flowers. So I think Deontay Johnson, while it's a good fit because he'll be on a contending team, You don't have to worry about like if the team is tanking or if he'll get benched. I think this is a good move fantasy wise for Deontay Johnson to build a little bit more consistency. Now let's keep going on, man. We got to get through our waivers. Even though we got breaking news, we got to break the news. We still got to break the waiver wire picks as well.
Break the news.
And some breaking news yesterday was that Christian Kirk was going to be out for the rest of the season. And so this Jacksonville team has already been going through a lot injury wise, but we got to find the receiver that can replace him. And we also have injuries to Brian Thomas, who could potentially, it's day-to-day right now, but there's potential that he can miss a week or two or extended period of time. Gabe Davis is also banged up. So Parker Washington now steps into a world of opportunity here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this is a player we talked about having like an extended role in the past. Last season when Christian Kirk went down, it was like Parker Washington. And he's a good player, but we also have to temper our expectations. This is for the manager who is down bad at wide receiver and needs an option. He played 74% of the snaps last week's game and had a season high 46 yards. So with all these injuries, he is the next man up. And sometimes that's more important than actually being like the most talented player on the field. It's just about opportunity when you're paired up with a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence who will pass the football. So I'm not saying that I think Parker Washington is going to be this elite wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1, but he's somebody I wouldn't leave out on waivers, especially if he happens to clear through the fab period or the waiver period.
Definitely. And we already know this Jags team needs all the help they can get. Coaches obviously been on the hot seat with all of the wide receivers going down. You know, I would like to have had Gabe Davis, but now that he's on the injury report, Parker Washington's somebody you have to consider. Should not be out there on the waiver wire.
Now, when I talk about Parker Washington too, it also comes with the caveat of like, is Brian Thomas going to be healthy? Because if Brian Thomas is out, now I would move Parker Washington up a little bit, right? But if Brian Thomas does play, this could still be a flex play on a weekly basis, depending on how he fits into this role as the season goes on. So a little bit of tinkering we're going to have to do with his value here, depending on how long Brian Thomas is out, depending on, what his role ends up being in this offense, depending on how long Gabe Davis is out, because the rock here is Evan Ingram. But Parker Washington, for those that need a receiver that maybe lost to Stephon Diggs, you've seen some values kind of tank here for some receivers over the last couple weeks. I think it's a good option here. We did have a couple questions that came in, P, and we're talking about some of these values, right, for players that were injured. Do you think Mechie is the guy right now, or do you think obviously like Tank Dell, Nico Collins? Do you think Mechie has like a long-term role, or is it just for this week?
No, listen. Of these two, Tank Dell. I mean, obviously Tank Dell's stock is up. Mechie, I do think has a solidified role, right? I think Mechie is going to fit in as that when the rest of the team is healthy, obviously outside of Diggs. Mechie's going to fit into that number 3. Yeah, when Nico's back, when Dell's back, Mechie will still have a role, more of like a PPR slot type of guy. I do think of the two right now in this moment, you obviously have to prioritize Tank, but Mechie is a guy that should not be on waivers while Diggs is out and while
Well, it's tough. It's tough right now because you get like there's a lot of values on these teams that we have to figure out. Even like the Brown situation, right? Is it Judy? If you can't get Cedric Tillman, do you go get Jerry Judy or do you get Elijah Moore? And it's tough. That's a tough decision to make. And I think at cost, it needs to be your factor, right? Like how badly do you need a receiver? If you need to go get Tillman, you got to pay the price to go get him. He's the best receiver out of the group. And then you have Jerry Judy, who's probably a little bit more of a middling asset. If he clears through waivers or maybe you need to spend a little bit less fab to go get him, now's the time to go get him. So I think because of the opportunity that I just talked about with Parker Washington, there is going to be opportunity for these Browns receivers as well. And a bunch of these other kind of middling receivers, the Deontay Johnson trade, we're going to see some new values now for the Carolina Panthers as well. So I think overall, I got a player we're going to talk about here later, P, on the Carolina Panthers that just so happened to be on this list. But right now, there's a carousel of different values. And I think, unfortunately for you, you got to make some tough decisions about what priority you want to use, what fab you want to spend, and what your record is will determine a lot of that. Mm-hmm. We're also getting to this area now where QBs are becoming a little bit more relevant, P. And we're seeing some of the young guys start to perform. Obviously, you talked about Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels putting on a show for us at the top, but we got an unheralded quarterback that's been playing pretty well too.
Yeah, man, Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a QB who you now have no choice but to put some respect on his name, right? Earlier in the season, they're trying to figure some stuff out. He was looked at as like somebody who should not be rostered. But what he's quietly been doing, not only is he dropping these dots, this ball placement, he came out as an older quarterback out of this draft. They were excited to get him. Through the first quarter of the season, it looked like a miss. But listen, this guy not only drops dots, but sneakily is one of the top rushing quarterbacks, right? Already has 260 rushing yards and 4 rushing TDs. Right now, in this very moment, this guy is a top 10 fantasy quarterback, right? So while, and this is probably more for your super flex leagues, but probably more for the owner of the Brock Purdy's of the world who are on buys, this is somebody who you can pick up, right? Because this next week, he's going up against Baltimore. And what does that mean? Baltimore means you do have to chase points, right? Because they're going to put up points. But another thing that we know of Baltimore here coming up in his next matchup is they've been giving it up to some quarterbacks lately, right? We've seen Jameis just cook them, right? And I believe the past few weeks, Baltimore's really not been as scary.
They've given up the most yards to quarterbacks in the passing game.
So Bo Nix to me is one of those players who have crazy sneaky value, rushing upside, and the kid throws out. He's only getting better and better as he gets more comfortable in this Sean Payton offense. Bo Nix, try and get him out.
Yeah, I haven't been a big Bo Nix guy, but I think he does carry some value, especially like you mentioned, if you have Brock Purdy or maybe you were starting Russell Wilson. This is a guy you can pick up and get some QB2 value out of. So I'm not overly mad at Bo Nix, and obviously in your single QB leagues, you probably have a better option, but he is a startable piece in your 12-team leagues if you do not have a quarterback, or maybe you lost Jordan Love over this past week and you're looking for an option. Bo Nix is there. Another quarterback who you might be able to get, Jameis Winston. And obviously, like, the name Jameis Winston, it scares some people, right? Because remember the 30 for 30 Jameis, the LASIK Jameis who got hurt in New Orleans. But he has a new opportunity here in Cleveland. And he put on a show against the Ravens. Obviously, a show. It's always a show with Jameis. 334 passing yards, man. And without any real bona fide number one stud receiver. He's doing it with Charles Tillman, Cedric. I don't keep doing that. Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, and obviously Elijah Moore with David Njoku. But it's Jameis at the end of the day. He is playing at a high level, and this is what we all expected out of Jameis coming out of college. And when we've seen the good Jameis, this is what it looks like. So obviously the matchup was really good for him against Baltimore, but it's like, when you get an inspired player, somebody that kind of has their back against the wall, it reminds me a lot of like a Geno Smith a couple years ago when he just started playing well. He started playing a little bit more free. He had been in the league for a while. He had that veteran just kind of knowledge. So I love getting Jameis right now where you can get him. The only thing is they do have a bye in week 10. They got a very tough slate coming up. So a lot of the good that comes with Jameis, there's also the bad that comes with Jameis. So I think, the thing is, the bad Jameis, it happens, right? But there's so much more you get with the good Jameis, including little gems that we get from Jameis in the post-game and pre-game, man. I love to hear it with Jameis, man. He's just one of those players that, like, is truly inspired.
Another opportunity like you have just received in the NFL. What does it mean to lead these guys, and what could be the start of what you said is something special moving forward?
Man, it's a white boy from Detroit that I really admire, named Eminem. He said, you only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity lasts once in a lifetime. And I know I got a quote, Eminem, he from Detroit, he right up the road, but man, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that the Lord provided me with this opportunity. I'm grateful for my teammates, my coaches, and these amazing fans.
Unbelievable performance today. Congratulations, Jameis.
Man, those get me pumped, bro. Those get me pumped.
They always say he's unintentionally the most funny player, but it's like, I would love to play for Jameis. Like, he's my quarterback. I would be like ready to go at any given point in time, man. Who knows what quotables are coming out, but fantasy performance wise, elevates this entire Browns team, man. Really good option if you're looking for quarterbacks. And I think he has some staying power moving forward. Like I said, schedule and playing location is probably the only thing with Jameis. They do have 2 home playoff games down the stretch. Another quarterback, P. There's a couple quarterbacks out here right now. You already talked about Bo Nix. Who else you got in mind?
Listen, Matthew Stafford, right, was looking really horrible to begin the season. Now has a full team around him, both of his wide receivers, Pro Bowl wide receivers coming back. And he looks the part. Now, Matthew Stafford is one of the most talented quarterbacks out there when you talk about throwing the rock. He could put it anywhere. He came back and actually carved up one of the league's top defenses in Minnesota to the tune of 279 yards and 4 touchdowns. This is somebody you got to put some respect on his name now. Now that, there was some talk about breaking up this offense and, Cooper Kupp's going to get traded here. We're going to trade Matthew Stafford in Minnesota. All of that talk has been shut down by the coach. The team is in sync, and I think it's time to put some more respect on Matthew Stafford's name as a top 12 fantasy quarterback with the weapons and the arsenal that he has. You got to respect it. So look at him. He got some pep in his step. You see him pulling a little juke, looking like a little Lamar Jackson out there. But you got to love it, man. You got to love it. So elusiveness is back. There's a lot of electricity back in this team. This guy is somebody who should not be on your waiver wire, and that goes for single quarterback leagues, super flex leagues. He should be rostered.
Yeah, he does carry weekly upside. Matthew Stafford's a player who we know he can go for 303 touchdowns any given week and matchup independent. It doesn't even matter who the matchup is. True. He just has elite performances at times. Let's get to a couple questions before we get into our last waiver wire picks. One of them that came in was Keon Coleman or Charles Tillman the priority. Me personally, I got Tillman as a priority over Keon Coleman. I think he'll be a little bit more consistent with Jameis down the stretch. You disagree?
Hey, listen, I think it's close, but I think I'm going to lean Coleman. I just think the upside is there. I think Coleman has a role. Tillman does have a role. It's close, but I'm leaning Coleman.
Yeah, and real quick, we're going to talk about this Carolina Panthers situation, another player here in just a second. But with the Deontay Johnson trade, Xavier Legette should not be on waivers in any form or fashion. He is now going to be an elite asset when it comes to receiver position, somebody with immense upside and a developmental piece for this team. And, obviously Adam Thielen is also on his way back coming off of IR. He had his 21-day practice window open last week. So we're picking up Xavier Legette. Adam Thielen is also another player that probably shouldn't be on waivers, probably more of a bench piece. But yeah, and when they're both healthy, I think Xavier Legette is the focal point, obviously, with this team rebuilding youth-wise, right?
100% agree.
Now, last one, P.
Older on his yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Last one, P. We saw Tyrone Tracy break out in a major way on Monday night, and obviously with teams needing running backs, there's some questions about whether you pick up Tyrone Tracy or a guy like Josh Downs with the news that Anthony Richardson has been benched until further notice, right? Joe Flacco is now stepping in as a starting quarterback. So obviously, yes, Joe Flacco will be the starting quarterback this week for the Indianapolis Colts. Would you pick up a guy like Tyrone Tracy who has RB2 appeal, or Josh Downs? Would you pick up a receiver like Josh Downs who has some high-end wide receiver 3 appeal now?
Give me Tracy. Look, you like Josh Downs, especially with Flacco there, but there's other wide receivers there that are going to eat as well. So it's not just the Josh Downs show where we mentioned Tracy in the past. Tracy sees the opportunity against a tough defense. I'm picking up Tracy.
Yeah, Khalil Shakir versus Cedric Tillman is like, if you have, to me, Cedric Tillman is like a locked-in wide receiver 3. I think if you're looking at some of those middling receivers, it's tough because Shakir, flex appeal. Coleman is like a flex appeal type player. I think Tillman to me is in a tier above. He's a wide receiver 3 for me, at least moving forward, but it's not as easy as it appears on the surface. Last one before we get into these waiver picks, P. Would you drop, you talked a lot about Matthew Stafford. Would you drop CJ Stroud in order to get Matthew Stafford? You called him a top 12 quarterback.
Listen, I'm going to tell you like this. You could find somebody else to drop. I would start Stafford right now over Stroud, but you don't drop Stroud. Stroud's not somebody you drop. Find somebody else on your team to drop.
Hey, he said find somebody else. The man said find somebody else. Find somebody else then.
Find them.
We might have to find somebody else on waivers, and obviously everybody who watches our show isn't in 8, 10, 12-team leagues. Some deeper league options as well for those deeper 12-team leagues and 14, 16-team leagues. Elijah Moore, obviously talked about Cedric Tillman. That's the name you want to get in 12-team leagues. But in your deeper 12-team leagues, your more competitive leagues, he may have been dropped as a player who hasn't really been productive. And I think Elijah Moore has been one of those names that's kind of gotten pounded a little bit in the fantasy space because the expectations that were put on him amongst, fantasy analysts and in the community and expectations in general. He had a really good game this weekend, obviously going for 12 targets. Like, you love to see that, but then 8 catches and 85 yards. So Jameis was looking his way early and often. And I think this is a player that doesn't provide a bunch of ceiling, but if you're looking for flex options during bye weeks, he has what you want to see, obviously, at an opportunity. And there's no guarantee that Cedric Tillman is every week going to be the wide receiver one on this team, or Jerry Jeudy is ahead of Elijah Moore on any given week. Elijah Moore is obviously going to have his opportunity. So I think if you're looking for deeper league options, looking for production, this Browns offense will probably be a little inconsistent, but I think Elijah Moore has what it takes at least to provide some flex value in your much deeper leagues.
Mm-hmm.
What about running back? You got any sleeper running backs that we can go over before
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, real quick.
Anybody sleeper-wise, you might have somebody over this weekend that you might even like with that Niner stuff there. You know what I mean? You might have had somebody in mind. I don't know. Maybe you do.
I may throw this on right here, man. But no, I'm going to tell you like this. Listen, Isaac Guerendo. All right, I know the Niners are already on a bye. I get that, right? There's already news of CMC coming back. But in the event that I just don't think that this guy should be on the waiver wire. And because they're on a bye, you can get him for relatively cheap with all the news that's coming out. But listen, Isaac Guerendo he has proven that he's a better running back right now than Jordan Mason, right? Jordan Mason has been playing hurt. Jordan Mason's not hitting the hole as hard because he's tending to that shoulder, whereas Isaac Guerendo gives the 49ers an opportunity to actually run that stretch zone run that they always do. This guy's 4.3 speed, high draft capital. He's going to be a factor even when CMC is there, and maybe in limited roles, maybe in running the clock out, but those are still fantasy points. Like this guy, 14 carries, 85 yards and a touchdown. He's averaging 6 yards per carry. This guy should not be rostered.
You mean should be on waivers, right? Like obviously
should not be on waivers.
I knew what you meant, but with that passion, we talk about that passion with these Niners. Sometimes it takes you different places. Listen, I like Guerendo. The only thing is Christian McCaffrey is on his way back and the team is on a bye. So it's a player you want to look at, but make sure, in your deeper 14, 16-man leagues, you never know what can happen with the McCaffrey injury if he comes back and he gets re-injured. Jordan Mason obviously banged up. So in your deeper leagues, I agree with you there. He's a pickup. And then lastly, this becomes even more prominent now with the Deontay Johnson trade. Jaylen Coker is a name that, may have been dropped on this show even a couple of weeks ago. So if you're not watching us every week, you need to watch us every week, man, because we provide options like Coker, who's going to step in as, a really good option for this Carolina Panthers team who is embracing the youth movement. And it's not like Coker is, he was an undrafted player, but he's going to get opportunity, and the coaching staff loves him. They love this kid, and he had 78 yards. And this is a talent thing. He is just a talented player. Steve Smith actually has come out and said nothing but great things about Jaylen Coker. And as you can see here, he has really great ball skills as well. So I think even when Adam Thielen is back, even with Xavier Legette back, this is a player that I wouldn't want to leave out there in 14, 16-team leagues, especially as the season goes on for the Panthers, and they may embrace starting some of their players that are a little younger as well. Yes, so if there's anybody I'm looking at, it's Jaylen Coker on this team. Obviously Xavier Legette's probably not available in most leagues, but he would be a priority if he is. He's the priority. Jaylen Coker is a name that does provide a little bit of upside. As far as the names we just talked about, right? Obviously there's a lot there. But I want to go over some of the questions that have come in here just recently, okay? Winston or Stafford? There's a lot of these Stafford, Winston questions. I think me and you might answer this a little differently. Who would you rather have, Winston or Stafford for the rest of the season?
Give me Stafford, and I don't think it's close. Yeah, give me Stafford. I don't think it's close. Just with the arsenal that they have, the weapons, and the schedule, I'm taking Stafford.
Yeah, we ain't answering it differently. It's Stafford.
I was going to say,
listen, I think if you were talking trade and all the rumors and stuff, maybe you would want to keep Winston, but you go with Stafford here. I think Winston is just a solid upside play for those leagues where Stafford's not available. Maybe your 2 QB leagues, Winston's somehow available still, but Winston's more of a 2 QB play. Stafford is available in the single QB leagues. All right, listen. Is there any other trades, P, that you think could happen? Because we're getting a lot of the rumors with Cooper Kupp. Deontay Johnson obviously was not happy and he's getting moved. We've seen Amari Cooper get traded. The Texans are now dealing with an injury. There's a lot of trade potential here. We got the quarterback stuff going on with Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco now. Quarterback stuff in Carolina. Quarterback stuff in Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields now on the bench. So there could be some moves here. Is there anything you could see trade-wise happening here? Carolina Panthers have a veteran receiver that might want to go play for a winner.
Yeah, I mean, I do see a few trades happening, more on the defense, but Thielen is obviously one that can go, right? A little long in the tooth, but still crispy route run, still can go up and get it. Contested catch guy. Another one I'm going to drop is Slayton. Right? He's talented. He's a little older on that team. They continue to lose. I can see him getting moved, probably even to I could see the Texans going and grabbing him because he can stretch the field. He's a veteran. He can catch the rock. He's somebody that if he were to get traded to the Texans would have a little bit more value. Other than those two, those are on the top of mind. Other than those two, you're going to probably see a little bit more defensive trades, right? So, but yeah, that's what I got for you. You got anything else, Jay?
No, you never know, man, because we've seen DeAndre Hopkins go. We've seen Deontay Johnson go. It's all the receivers that have really been on the trade block outside of a Cooper Kupp. Most of the receivers that have been on the trade block have actually been shipped off, which is kind of weird. So I don't know. I just don't see a whole lot here as far as trades, but with the way the NFL is right now, you never know. You never know. Listen, let's go over the plays one more time. Obviously, we talked about some bigger names at the top, but for the week 9 waiver wire, Cedric Tillman, receiver for the Browns, John Mechie, Parker Washington, Bo Nix, quarterback Jameis Winston, Matthew Stafford, Elijah Moore, Isaac Guerrero, and Jaylen Coker in your deeper leagues. All right. Any parting thoughts before we get off, P?
Yeah, we talked about some names. A lot of 49ers on the bye, so those names we talked about last week probably got dropped. Pearsall, Jennings. If they got dropped, go and grab them for next to nothing and hold on to them because they got long-lasting value.
And just know this is the time of year where we do get surprises. We do get players that start to come up. You may see a Jonathan Brooks type player start to emerge here down later. So just know over the next couple of weeks, we got you guys covered with the weekly waiver wire. We will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.